This is one of those stories where it doesn't end up being exactly what you thought it was initially. See, it became big news about a day or two ago that Apple removed one of the Game Boy Advance's biggest emulators on their platform. Now, if you remember, if you recall, it was very recently, like just maybe a couple weeks ago, that Apple actually came out and said, hey, we are now going to allow emulators again on our App Store. It was a very big shift from where they originally had stood for so long. It seemed like they were very much against emulators, but they came out recently. They said, hey, we're going to allow them because, of course, they are legal, and that is true. Emulators themselves are legal. It is just the usage of, pirated games, ROMs, that sort of thing. That's what's illegal. So that was a big W for Apple. A lot of people like that. But then this broke just very recently. A very popular Game Boy Advance emulator called GBA was removed from the Apple App Store. And at first, it was seemingly for no reason. A lot of people, myself included, when they saw this story, they immediately thought two things, both not very good. The first one being, oh, well, there you go. Apple just did a complete 180 on their stance on emulators within like 2 weeks of them releasing their, awesome stance on how they were going to be fine with emulators. They just completely walked back their claim. Wow, that is really too bad. Now, the other thing that people thought, and this was equally as bad, is that, oh, great, this is Nintendo. Like, we have heard a lot of stuff with Nintendo recently with their canceling of emulators that they don't like. So maybe it's not Apple, maybe it's Nintendo. Like, here we go again with Nintendo. Either scenario is not good, obviously. And this is a very big app on the App Store. I believe this is one of the fastest growing GBA emulators on the Apple App Store. It was like exploding in popularity. So this is terrible. It's either Nintendo or Apple not being very good, not thinking about the fans. Yeah, it's too bad. Well, it turns out that is absolutely not the reason why it was removed. It was actually removed for what seems like a good reason. See, it all started when this person, Riley Testut. Now, Riley Testut is an app developer. It looks like he has been developing apps for what looks like 8 years now. He has been around the market for a long time, and he is most well known for his Game Boy Advance emulator called GBA for iOS. Now, I'm trying to find out how long this app has been around. I believe it has been around for years, because just looking at the interface, it looks very familiar to me. I believe I have actually used this like a long time ago. So, we talked about how iGBA was a rising popular app. Well, GBA for iOS, I believe, is like one of the OGs. Or at the very least, it's a very popular GBA emulator. I mean, it's just definitely up there. So Riley Testa noticed that this iGBA emulator is very similar to his GBA for iOS emulator. In fact, so similar that he believes that it was essentially, basically, a sort of replica of his app. Basically, his app was stolen, had a few things here and there tweaked, and it even had like some ads slapped on it, and then boom, you got iGBA. So Riley actually voiced this opinion to Apple, and it looks like Apple really took this into consideration, and that is why they completely removed the iGBA emulator from their App Store. So no, it doesn't look like it's because Apple did a 180 on their stance, and no, I don't think it's because Nintendo wanted to step in and, be Nintendo and continue how they've been recently towards emulators. No, it actually seems like in this case, it was Apple kind of being good and actually enforcing a sort of code where app developers can't just get their material copied off of. So I really like this story. What started out as something that could have been, another bad story related to emulators. I mean, we've seen this a lot with emulators in the past month or two. Actually ended up being a pretty good story. I still think it is pretty bad that, emulators, they still get a bad rap these days. They still don't get treated the best by developers from big tech companies. But I will say Apple's stance they made a couple weeks ago on actually allowing emulators on their App Store is a big W and continues to be a big W. Now that it seems that not only did they not do a 180 on their stance there, but in fact they were also watching out for the original app developer's interests and protecting the sort of IP of his own emulator. I know we've still got issues in the world of emulation, believe me, I know things are far from finished, but stuff like this, having a victory for once for emulation, that to me is a good thing.